I think we should get started. We've got everybody. So thank you all for coming and making the meeting this morning. Quick things, we just want to review the information that Rachel and Steve diligently put together for the new tentative redistricting boundaries for the 29 supervisory districts. So at that point, I will open it up and see if anybody has questions, if anybody wants to discuss anything. Steve and Rachel, are there any things you want to say to start with as far as the process and any notable changes?
Well, if everybody reviewed maybe their areas and I think this went out to full county board, is that
Yes.
correct? So they looked at their particular district, I would assume. There were some significant changes relatively over on the east side, up in District 2, 7 and 5 over there on the east side as well. So if you saw those, it's just to get enough people in there to get that number up or down, whatever the case may be, to fit that target number of 1567. So I think we can go and take any questions or comments.
I thought what you did looked really good, and I just want to thank you and Rachel for spending the time and doing it and making it simple for the rest of us, I think. Yeah, but I thought it looked good. I liked that none of the supervisors ended up being in the same district.
Right.
I thought you did a great job with that. I'm sure it was difficult when there was a couple of them that looked like they lived pretty close to each other. And I didn't realize that.
Yeah, right across the street.
Oh, is that what it is? Wow.
I think so, yeah. In the city, yes.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it's great.
Just we're a little above our projected deviation of 10%. We're looking at 14%. And I don't know what the group's consensus is on targeting that 10% and making that number.
What is our statutory obligation?
Yeah, it's 10% is suggested.
But it's not mandated?
Right.
And how much more work would be involved if we were to try to get it down to that 10%?
Yeah, then a lot of funny looking districts, Paul. You know, well, we'd have to jump over Lake Monoman in some cases, you know, to get some population added to that district on the northwest side. So that kind of, I don't know, jumping across geographical boundaries, streets, roads, and other boundaries like that. It's achievable, but it may create some odd looking wards and districts in the end.
And how likely do you think it is that the state, once we submit the tentative plan, will push back?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't say they would, because in the past we've just had that target number and it's been above that in the past 2 go-rounds. So if somebody, this is my opinion or perception on this, if somebody challenged it, then, you know, if it goes to court, then that may be, you know, the legal ground they stand on to say you didn't achieve that 10%, you had 14%. So
Okay. That sounds like it's a relatively good bet. If somebody does want to bring a legal challenge, I don't know how vigorously we'll defend ourselves, but you know, I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm also not convinced if in fact, let me ask you this, do we know how this deviation for this iteration compares to the past? What percentages were the last one, 2010?
Yeah, I believe it was high. It was probably, you know, above this 14%. Yeah, when we brought in just the blocks for 2020 into our old plan, we were at 47% deviation. So that's the amount that the population has shifted around in the county. So that tells me it was high back in 2010 as well. So we've got that 47% down to that 14. We could probably get it down a little farther to maybe 11 or 12. But we struggled with that, Rachel and I did, to get that 14% where it's at and try to keep those incumbents within their districts. So
it would be good, I think, to have in our back pocket the actual deviation from the 2010 version to show that we're making progress in terms,
okay,
moving closer to that 10% ideal.
okay, I think
I'm not suggesting any changes to the map,
okay,
but if we could have that number in our back pocket so we could trot that out and show that improvements are being made.
okay, that'll take a little statistical analysis. I don't think the WISE LR was up to this level of sophistication of just statistical analysis back then, so we'll have to bring in and do it probably in-house by hand.
So it's not something that we would have submitted as part of the record with the maps when we created them?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, this is a whole, a kind of a new software platform we're working with now. And that number is evident right on the fly. As soon as you make one block change into a district, that number changes. So it's kind of a running total. It's nice to see that, but it also, it keeps your...
Well, with our very tight timeline on this, I do not want to create a project that's going to take a lot of time by you and Rachel. If it is something that would take too much time, especially with the the looming steps that we have to make in this, I have no problem putting it off, making that evaluation. It just seemed like it would be a good thing to have. So I'll leave that up to you guys as to what your time allocations are.
Yeah. Okay. We'll look into that, pulling that number. That's a good idea.
Is the main deviation in the city of Menominee, or is it because those districts are closer together?
I think that might be better answered if we pull up the actual map and look at it. Rachel, can you dive in there and share your screen? And that's a good question. It varies from outside to inside the city limits, but Rachel, I'll pull that up and show how that works. You can see the percent deviation number in that column, and that's the number that we're shooting for. So 11, that's below that 7.47. So in essence, that's below 10%, but what you do is you take the highest and the lowest and add those together, if that makes sense, without the negative sign. So you turn the 7.47 to positive and then add it to, I think it's 6 point something on the high end. And that's our 14% more or less. So 11 is, I think, Jim Anderson, just outside the city. So
one thing we should mention too, in trying to adjust these boundaries, we do take into account the impact that it does have on the municipal clerks. For example, the town of Menominee has 3 wards as it is and consistently has. So, we try and be mindful to not, if it's possible, to not create more or, reduce just for the administration of elections, just to not completely alter what has been done. So there aren't too many municipalities that have multiple, but there are a handful, and they kind of consistently have had split between supervisors. So.
Did it affect the city council members with our changes in the city, right? Because don't they use the same
Yes.
yeah,
boundaries?
and it will. And and Andrew, you may be more versed in this, but I think then that plan has to go to the city. They have to adopt it and then change their alderman districts to fit and alternate the wards as well.
Wasn't it supposed to be 60 days they had under the
Yeah,
normal situation? They may not have it this time, but
right.
Yeah, they've got 30 days this time. And when I did a preliminary look at the data that Steve and Rachel diligently put together, it didn't appear that any of the city council aldermanic districts, that any of the city council members were drawn out of their current wards. So,
Oh, that's good to hear, because we didn't have those addresses when we did this. Just as a note, the ward population range by statute is 600 to 2100 in a city with this population, so we fit in that groove too. So I think if that's the case with all the alder persons in their district, that's kind of a really good plus for us. And then, so yes, and to answer your question, some of them were in the city up on the north end, 14 and 13. And that's, Paul, where I was talking about having to jump across the lake, perhaps to get into, 23 and move it to 13. But you can see the size of that block on 23, 527 persons. One click and your deviation goes pretty far out again.
right.
If we added that to another district, that's a big block, and it's not really easy to work around those big blocks. I guess I mentioned that in the past, but there's a pretty prime example right there. But we worked around 13 and 14, and that's John Calabrese and I forget who 13 is. Yep. Jody, yes, and she lives on that Tainer the Cannery Estates there. So we kept those in mind. And some of the old neighborhoods, which is another part of, some of the guidance of redistricting is to keep some of the neighborhoods intact, some of the old, that old North Platte of Menominee there. These are older homes and older neighborhoods. And so anyway, a lot of that thought went into drawing these lines while keeping the incumbents inside their district.
And we also have to keep in mind the boundaries that are on the ground, because eventually we'll have to describe these district boundaries, with legal language. So we have to be mindful of that. That's why you see a lot of these census blocks follow either natural features or like streets and municipal boundaries. So it's kind of all in an effort to describe them. So there was a portion of this before the census data was released where we could suggest where blocks be separated to help make these districts easier. But the census kind of decides where those boundaries are ultimately drawn. So this is what we have to work with.
Yeah. That's a good point. So yeah, we have to write the legals, and it's nice to write along the lake shore of Lake Menomin up to 21st or up to I-94, follow I-94 easterly to County Trunk Highway B and that kind of thing, instead of saying to Joe Schmo's South 40 line and then over, that makes it a little easier to get those districts in writing 29 times, which we're going to have to do eventually. So that was part of it in 2010, and I think it is part of it this time. Of course, I think Nick chimed in on that at some point here, Corp Council. So any other questions on the whole plan itself and the process we used? Or
I've got a question on the picture of the map that you've got up. I didn't notice it before going through, but just south of 94, area 12, it looks like there's a little spot out right there.
The enclave.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Why is that?
Municipal boundaries.
Yeah, it is. Rachel, you want to take that one?
Yeah.
Seen.
Yeah, so this is actually one property in the town of Menominee. It's very odd. I think it's, I forget who the owner is right now, but it's right by Fleet Farm. So they have one property that's town of Menominee property that sticks into the city boundaries. It's connected, so it's valid, but it is,
Oh,
it's a municipal boundary, yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
It's what's called a flag lot.
And it's been there for 20, 30 years now. I don't know why it didn't get annexed, and it should maybe. I don't know why.
They didn't want to
No.
pay city taxes.
Probably.
Rachel, is that the Mickelson property?
I'll check here. I think we can actually put the parcel layers on.
I think it's the Mickelson.
But yeah, that's a good point, Dave, because we have to work around those municipal boundaries as
Sure.
well, you know, so
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Yes, and the description, you know, I can see how the boundaries, even out in the country, it makes it easier for the clerk and everybody if the boundaries are, you know, a road or something that differentiates it compared to a line across the field.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it just the people know what ward they're in that way too, you know. Well, I'm east of 490th Street, then I vote for this district, you know,
Right.
this ward. So yeah, it is better that way. So that's what we try to keep in mind. I can't guarantee it's 100% that way until we start actually digging in and writing these legals right now, but it's pretty close the way the census does those blocks. They try to follow those guidelines. We found the one up. Rachel, could you pan up to that power line one where it's kind of goofy, where there's a see that it's in I think, Brian, that's your district up there. That power line, see that 13 inch, that's a power line. So it's an overhead power line. You can see the cut through the trees. So they use that as a census block divider, which I guess there's nothing else out there.
So I noticed, I didn't notice it earlier, but like for my district 16, there's like a weird jog around the lake.
Yes.
Just added.
It was added, yeah, because we needed to get the population. So you've got, you know, like the waterfront bar and then all those lakefront homes going up.
It's like a rabbit. And you're like the rabbit district or the bull.
Yeah.
If you want to be the bull, you can be the bull district. It's up to you. But
like, wouldn't the 28 and 5 on Main Street add up, and then that district would have along the lake?
Which one now?
Because you have on Main Street, you have a little jog, and it doesn't that equal 33 in the Peach?
Oh, yeah.
The 28.5. Like, wouldn't it make sense for the other district to pick up the 20? I don't know. It's just an odd shape.
It
Instead of
is
square.
And we can look at that if you want us to.
I don't know. It might actually affect the city council though, because I think someone's on Main Street there that's in a different. So that might be the issue.
yeah, it's Ryland Erdman, and I think in this scenario, he's on 11th, and he's still in his current district. It matches Sarah Kennedy's district. So even with these new boundaries.
So that brings up a question. Is there some small tweaks that we want to make on this map, you know, based on the supervisor's recommendation or thoughts? Do we want to click a few boxes and try to work that out, and then come back to it? Or what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, going to Ann's point, that right on Main Street, oh, I lost it. Even with Ann's suggestion, Ryland would still be in his current city council ward, and Sarah Kennedy would not be affected. But I mean, it's a lot of work. We understand how much work this was for you too, and it's really, you know, quite impressive how much you were able to process in such a short period of time.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we, you know, that's, I guess,
the current one.
the process, yeah, is to, you know, have a tentative plan, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be fixed in stone at this time. Is that what I understand? And then when it comes around the second time, that's when we want it the final. So I don't know. Again, we're driving these maps, and we'll do what you guys instruct us to do. But and we can look at that.
Tell me, again, what is the next step?
So the next step would be, we have time, because we did this meeting as early as today. We have time to, if the redistricting committee wants to look at any of this information and make any changes or suggestions, you know, Steve and Rachel can take that into account. And we can look at this map one more time before making a final recommendation, if there are any changes that are required or requested before the county board meeting on the 15th of September. We can certainly do that. Or if everyone's comfortable with this now, we can adopt this as the tentative plan, knowing that once after the September 15th meeting, if this tentative plan is adopted by the county board, it gets punted to the municipalities, and they might have adjustments and changes that they want made. And that could happen in the process before it comes back for a final decision at the November 9th meeting.
Does it need to be in front of our executive committee before it goes to the county board? Because that meeting is on the 8th of September.
I don't know that it does, Paul, because the redistricting committee has been established. I guess I don't know that in the statutes it is required to go through exec. I can check on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's required to go through exec, because that's particular to us. But
Dave, would you like to have it at exec? Or Vaughn?
Only if it's, if we're satisfied with it.
yeah, I was going to suggest that it would be good if at exec we're pretty confident of the version that's going to be in front of the county board the following week, a week later on Wednesday. That would be a good thing. That gives us between now and next Wednesday for any further changes that anybody might be interested in. In terms of efficiency, one approach would be to ask committee members to take kind of a fine-tooth comb review of what Steve and Rachel have produced, and simply contact by email with any questions. Allow staff to adjust this thing up to the day of the executive committee meeting on September 8th, which is a 3:30 meeting, and then present, you know, any changes, if you will, or any suggested changes rather. I'm just thinking out loud here. I apologize if it's.
No, that's good. Can I just jump in then?
Yeah.
And then we could, you know, document those small edits. Let's say, and that we take that 34 person block out and add it in somewhere else. We would note that in an email, some sort of PDF map or something. And then they would be aware that the whole.
Another option, executive, like I say, is at 3:30, depending on members of this committee's availability. If we want this committee to convene and look at it before exec, it could be at 1 o'clock, it could be at 2 o'clock. We've got transit and highway, and I know that one can go long, so I would hesitate to say on September the 8th that we do any meeting of this group in the morning, but certainly 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, so that this committee could have eyes on any suggested changes between now and next Wednesday before executive sees it at 3:30. Is that an idea worth pursuing? What are people's schedules look like for Wednesday, September 8th? Would you be available for a 1 o'clock meeting?
This is Brian. I would not be.
What about 2 o'clock, Brian?
No,
Okay. And I assume your morning is full as well?
I got a highway and facilities and
Yeah.
then exec in the afternoon. I got something for Dunn Energy during the days.
Okay. Just looking at calendars, and I'm presuming, I mean, you guys can say whether or not you agree. Another option would be Tuesday afternoon. One day before executive. If we want this committee to take the approach of between now and Tuesday, individual members look over it closely, raise any questions or make any suggestions via email to Steve and Rachel. They will have time to adjust. This committee can convene, talk about those specific adjustments or requests or proposals, suggestions at a meeting Tuesday afternoon, allowing it to be put in the version that it will be presented. It's not an action item for executive, but it'd be presented so that executive knows what the county board will be taking action on the following Wednesday on the 15th of September. How does everybody's September 7 Tuesday afternoon look?
I could meet, 1, 2 o'clock.
Dave, what about your calendar?
Well, I didn't bring my calendar down here. It's upstairs, but I don't remember anything, so.
And does 2 o'clock work for you on Tuesday?
Yeah, 2 o'clock or after, slightly after 2.
Okay. And Brian?
Yeah, I'm good. That'll work.
Mike?
I'm not sure what time that would be in England, so I'm not positive.
8 hours before.
It's 6. So I think you should still be up, Mike. No pressure.
6 a.m. would be great.
Okay. Do we want to do that as an approach?
A question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Is there adjustments that we want to make, or was everybody kind of happy with what's here?
Well, we know we have the one adjustment we want to look at that Ann raised about the moose. I think it's a moose, by the way. It's not a bull, it's a moose.
All right.
So we know there's one we want to look at there. What I'm trying to suggest by having a meeting on Tuesday of next week, and between now and then looking very closely, and I would recommend that if anybody does have any other suggestions or questions, that they be delivered to Steve and Rachel not later than Friday of this week, so they have time to actually make the adjustments, is just so that we're able to say that this redistricting committee actually took the time, despite the short timeline, to look at this closely. Best case scenario, nobody has any other questions. There are no other adjustments. I'm sure Steve and Rachel will cry that they don't have more work to do.
Yes.
But at least we'll be able to say that there was a thorough review of the tentative plan by the members and it was adjusted.
Yeah, I think that screen you're looking at now, the pink lines are the old district lines, Rachel, is that accurate?
Yeah, it must be.
Old
So-
board lines, yep.
Yeah, so anyway, that 34 was added. You can see
Mhm.
how it used to be.
Why don't we take a minute or a couple of minutes and just show how complicated it would be if you were to try to move that out?
Mhm.
And you said you could just click on the boxes and change things.
Yep.
Because I'm assuming that if you change that, it's gonna have a domino effect of changing a few other things.
Yes, it does. So that affects that deviation, that overall plan deviation in the upper right there. So
Right.
if Rachel, if you want to give that a whirl, Rachel's
Yeah, I will.
driving.
You know,
Okay.
just show us that.
Okay.
So it's fairly simple to assign. So right here, I guess these are some of the big things we look at. So the overall plan deviation is what Steve was talking about before, the difference between the highest and the lowest districts where we try and get that in 10%. So then this 16 is the one we're gonna affect right now, 16 and 22. I can't fit them all into one screen for you. Let's see if I can. Okay, so 16 right now, we're under by 4.5%, which is acceptable. And then 22 is under by 3.32%. So I changed the district to 22 because I'm going to put this 34 back. All right, so easy enough to assign. You'll see 22 is now has more population, so it's less low. And now 16 is negative 6.76%. So now we need to add. So then we were talking about adding to 16. So I just change that district. And these are 0 blocks, so they're not going to really change anything. So we can leave that. Now we're pretty much back in that ballpark. And 22 is just a little further under now. So we're still within those acceptable ranges. So that would be a fine adjustment to make. That one wasn't too crazy. That's why these nice smaller block geometries are really nice to work with, and it's harder to do outside of the city or outside of villages.
We didn't lose any elected person in terms of their location.
Ann, chime in on that one. Does that look right to you? I don't think Ann got bumped out in anything.
No,
she's done.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm on 11th and 7th.
Okay. And then I'm not sure where the alderpersons live. So
Yep, Ryland's on 11th and Main in that 23 block, so he'd be fine. And Nate's over down on 8th and 10th, I think. So should be fine.
okay. So again, that changed things within our deviation, but the overall plan deviation is still at 14.23. You know, so, but that's the kind of things that we want to hear, is those small little edits. Yes, they're a little easier to make, like Rachel mentioned, in the city with those nice blocks that we have there. A little harder when you get out in the rural areas with the bigger blocks and the bigger geographical blocks. And I think 11 is one of our perpetrators, that it's our lowest district, and we've struggled with how to get that guy in line. Just kind of, you end up with some really weird looking, supervisor districts.
Oh,
yeah, this one is particularly tricky because you have a municipal boundary here, existing supervisor boundaries, but if we continue more to the east, then we're going to have 28 be not contiguous, which you can't have. 28 is kind of this odd district. So 28 grew in population as well. So you can see we had to shift some of that population from 28 over to 29 because it grew. A lot of these the eastern side of the county really grew.
We tried to keep it at the Red Cedar River going south towards Durand as the boundary, but it couldn't work that way with the population. So we used Highway 25 as a natural feature, which got us to 29 where it should be, and 28 where it should be. So those two blocks, 23 and 22, used to be in 28, and we kind of moved those. So those are some of the small changes that we did. And hopefully those members in those districts will notice that and say, well, hey, this is, like Ann mentioned, this is what I see on that. They know their districts way better than we do, of course.
Yeah, and we haven't heard anything from any of the other supervisors, have we?
Okay, that's a positive.
Yes.
And then up in Colfax area, that changed quite. That's where our population density more or less shifted over to the east, and there were you can see the pink versus the color now, the greenish. We kind of had to do some wrangling in there. But it's all kind of a numbers game at that point, and then try to keep those incumbents within their district as well.
Okay, so it sounds like Tuesday, September 7th at 2 p.m. will work for the next meeting. Everybody can review this data, and if there's any changes they want made, get them to Rachel and Steve by Friday, so there's time to make adjustments and modifications. Are there any other questions or concerns thus far? Rachel?
If there are edits that are requested of people outside of this committee, how are those coming through? Or who are they directed? Because the tentative plan was shared with those members. How was their feedback directed?
Yep. Since I was the one that shared it, I would imagine that they would respond to me, and I would let both Steve and Rachel, if there are any other requests.
And that's been about a week though, and we haven't heard anything, correct?
Correct.
And then so our deadline to have a new, let's say new plan or an updated revised plan, do you want that? How do you want to see that? The same kind of
electronically,
thing? Okay.
Steve, what I'll do, because the executive is going to be a Zoom meeting, is make sure you and Rachel are included in the invite, and we'll do the same thing, screen share.
Okay.
That way it could be the most up-to-date version of the tentative plan that's presented to executive. Again, it's a non-action item by executive. In fact, I've got it under county manager's report for you guys to have a chance to go over that.
Okay. Does everybody like this platform that we're using here? I think
it's useful.
Okay, good. Yeah. Awesome. So then we can cut down on the hard copy mapping if everybody's comfortable with this software. I think it's nice. Pretty impressed the way they developed that since the last go round. So very user friendly on our end.
And I would also recommend for county board then on September 15, the same electronic version. It will also be a Zoom meeting, and it can be projected for anybody who is in place. But if we make it entirely Zoom, this would be a great way of showing what the tentative plan is the county board's taking action on.
Okay.
I have a question, if I may. Steve, once we get through this and we have a settled map, do these maps go out to the voting districts then? Is anybody from each voting district, each township, each village?
Well,
get one of these?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Vaughn. I think it's part of the process, and Andrew chime in here. When we tentatively approve it, it does go to the local municipalities.
Yes, so if the county board adopts the tentative plan on the 15th, This information all gets there. Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. Gets punted to the municipal board or to the municipalities for them to review. And then they have the option to approve it or make any adjustments that they want, working with Steve and Rachel. And then after that, they've got 30 days this time. Normally they would have 60, but on our condensed timeline, they've got 30 days essentially from September 15th, a little more than 30 days, till October 18th before that data has to be approved and volleyed back to the county. Then that's when we do the reconciliation component. Yeah. So the municipal wards, the reconciliation, and then they'd establish their aldermanic districts. And then when it comes back to the county, that's when we would do the final plan. And that would need to be adopted at the November 9th county board meeting. So, yes, they all have an opportunity to review this information and make any suggestions or edits as they would request.
Andrew, the action being taken on September 15 by the county board to approve the tentative plan so it can be distributed to the municipalities, is that by resolution or by motion?
Resolution.
Okay, so it makes sense in terms of the progress of that meeting, the September 15 county board meeting, to open the meeting
with the public hearing.
Have the pledge of allegiance, then go to the public hearing, which means that the chairman will announce, this is a public hearing for these purposes. Invite anybody to speak to do so. When that is concluded, close the public hearing. And I would recommend we move directly from there to resolution approving the tentative redistricting plan, and then go on with the regular county board business.
That's fine. That would work. Yeah.
Can I circle back on Supervisor Headland's question a little bit here? So then once those districts get finalized, then normally we make small maps for each supervisor that wants to run again. And that's been the process in the past, where they'll come in, probably Andrew's office. We supplied those to clerk, and then the supervisor comes in and sees Andrew and his staff, and they say, where can we get a map so we can get it out? We know where our districts are. We know whose door to knock on if they're running for the election. So that's all part of the process after everything kind of gets finalized, if that helps fill in that question.
The other thing I have, Steve, is I've noticed in the past I've even taken county maps and make sure that the voting places in my district have county map. But it would sure be nice to have these approved maps up, because people will walk in. I've been over voting here in Boyceville, and people walk in to vote, and then we say, no, you're not in this. And where do I vote? And number one, it's nice to have the county map. It'd be nice to have the district map right there.
You bet. And we certainly can make maps, hard copy maps, based on all of this mapping once we get close to a final. I will make a note on the village of Boyceville real quick. So their population is 1,100 this go around, and they have one ward. And I think statutorily they need to have 2 wards.
Yep, they do.
Okay. So, and that's true with Rock Creek, the town of, as well. They came in at 1003. So they're 3 over. So they need to build another ward, and that ward can contain between 300 and 1,000 persons. So that's kind of a bigger deal for the local munis, but as long as they're aware of it, hopefully they can accommodate that.
Okay. And now, have you sent a reminder of that at all? Anybody to Darling?
Not yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone before we?
You'll send out the invite for the Tuesday meeting, Andrew?
Yep, we'll get that taken care of.
Okay.
I'll circle back with both Boyceville and Rock Creek about their new wards that they're going to need to establish, so that they're aware.
Thank you.
I have been talking with all the municipal clerks about this process, so they're pretty familiar with it, but otherwise it should be good. If you've got other suggested changes that you'd like to see based on this current mapping, please let Steve and Rachel know by this Friday so that we can get those established before the next meeting on Tuesday, September 7th at 2 p.m. Anything else? Last call?
I just want to ask Ann if those edits we just made live here are acceptable to her, because it certainly looked like the numbers were working for our side.
I mean, it's still a little odd, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, but that's, I mean, I guess it affects, where people vote. So actually some of those people will vote closer than they had in the past.
I see.
Mhm.
So if you have any other, items, please email or call. And our contact's pretty easy. We're pretty easy to get a hold of, or come in and see us.
Turned our moose into a unicorn.
Yeah.
I think that's it for me.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everyone. We will see you next
Yeah.
Tuesday,
Okay,
September 7th.
Thank you.
thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Guys.